Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Secretary Yellen, it's always wonderful to have an opportunity to see you, and thank you so much for your incredible service. I just want to start with a general comment, Mr. Chairman, that I think probably today, as I've heard in other committees as well, we're going to hear a lot about deficits being out of control, and I just always have to put this in some context. I was in the House of Representatives in 1997 when we balanced the budget for the first time in 30 years under a Democratic president, Bill Clinton. Went into the Senate. We saw exploding deficits under Republican president for a number of different reasons, but ended his tenure with a financial crisis. As a Democratic president comes in, President Obama has to dig our way out of a financial crisis. By the time he leaves, we are bringing down the deficit. We go into the next president, our President Trump explodes the deficit again. Now we have a Democratic president who's having to dig us out of a different kind of crisis, which is the health pandemic, and trying to right-size things. So from my perspective, working with Democratic presidents, we've tried step by step to do the right policies to not only bring down the deficit, but make sure that things are being done right for people in our country. So, Secretary Yellen, I wanted to talk to you specifically about that in terms of the tax code, because there's clear differences between what President Biden wants, what we want as Democratic majorities, what our Republican colleagues did in the last in their time in charge, largest tax cut for the wealthiest in our country in 2017. We've put in place the child tax credit. We want to extend that further. President extends it for 5 years. I would love to see it as well extended permanently, but the idea of a tax cut for working families. And then you juxtaposition that whole discussion with what we want to do with what we have talked about and had hearings on in the committee on what's called the tax gap, difference between what people owe and what people pay. And when we look more closely at that, I mean, the former IRS commissioners calls that gap as large as $1 trillion a year. I don't know if that's accurate. It's certainly, I think, believable. It's several hundred billion. But when you look at that, again, from a fairness standpoint, a study in 2019 found that Humphreys County in Mississippi was the most heavily audited county in America, mostly African American, a third under the poverty line, mostly focused on the earned income tax credit rather than folks with wealthy people, complicated tax forms, ways to hide their income, and so on. So we see tax rates that are unfair, and then we see folks not reporting income, hiding income, and so on. So could you just speak broadly about when the president is talking about tax cuts for working people, and then asking folks, everybody to pay their fair share. And frankly, I don't think it's a tax increase to ask a billionaire to pay more than zero on their taxes. People in Michigan don't think that. But could you speak just in the big picture about right-sizing the tax system and making sure that everybody pays what they are supposed to be paying?
Thank you for that question, Senator. President Biden feels that it's crucial that we have a tax system that's fair and one where we enforce tax laws so that individuals and corporations pay what they owe. And we really need to do that in order to assist hardworking, low-income families, for example, with the child tax credit that you mentioned that is working now to reduce child poverty by almost 50% and give children and families the opportunities they need to succeed in America and to get ahead. As you pointed out, there's an enormous tax gap. One number we've been using, one estimate, is that it will amount to at least $7 trillion over the next decade. And it largely reflects shortfalls in collections for high-income individuals and corporations. And we have proposed, the Biden budget proposes to close this tax gap. by giving the IRS the resources and the technology and the money and long-term time perspective they need to recruit, train, and retain qualified staff that can conduct specialized, complicated audits. We've also proposed to give the IRS a bit more information that will greatly enhance its ability to target those audits at those who are non-compliant and not at taxpayers who are obeying the law and pay what they owe.
I thank my colleague from Michigan. We've got